Hi, I'm Zach Parks. I'm the director of Christians for Kokesh. I'm here with Stephen tonight. Stephen, what are we discussing?
Healthcare and libertarianism
Healthcare
and
and
Christianity.
libertarianism and Christianity. How do those things? I kind of picked that partially because I didn't know how they would go together. I'm like, I'll have to think about this. And I'm trying to think beyond free markets. The Bible teaches free markets, individual property ownership, property in exchange. And so we should have a free market healthcare system. We should not have a socialist system. It is unethical and it doesn't work. It just ends up with rationing of healthcare, long lines, and it's a lot more expensive. I love the saying, if you think healthcare is expensive now, wait till it's free.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's ripe for abuse. It's ripe for abuse. If you are a Second Amendment advocate, sorry, your surgery is denied. If you are a pro-life activist, sorry, this life-saving medication is denied. If you're an AIDS patient, you get to the front of the line. That's political correctness will govern healthcare decisions, and that's outrageous.
Yeah. So, and I wholeheartedly agree with everything you just said. But you used a word that I think a lot of people use and they don't know what it means. Socialism. What is a socialist? And a socialist is this: somebody who believes that the government should and must control the means of production. So in this case, the government's in control of healthcare. I have a song for you that I used to sing to my sister. And my sister is thinking about becoming a member of the Georgia Libertarian Party. And she is voting Joe Jorgensen this year. Love you, Barbie. You're the greatest sister ever. So this one time, she got on to me because I was sick and I had to go to the VA and she could go to the VA. So I sang her a song. Come and see, and you'll see a land of pure and utter frustration at the administration for Veterans Affairs. So, true story. I come home from Afghanistan. I spent some time in rehab. I broke my legs. And I have cages around both my legs. And my sister takes me to the VA. My sister voted Obama twice. She loved Barry. A lot of you remember there was, back in 2006, they were calling him Barry Obama because that was his hood name or something. I don't know. But she was super pro-Obama. And she thought government healthcare was the greatest thing. So she takes me to the VA one day. And they're like, we need to know that your legs are broken. And I go, ma'am, look over the counter. And I've got cages around my legs. And she goes, no, I need paperwork, right? And my sister, at this point in time, used one of those step counters. I'm like, let's play a game today. She goes, this is going to take an hour. I'm like, this is going to take all day. I told you to take the day off for a reason. So she reprograms her step counter. And it was like 23,000 steps, right? We're in the Atlanta VA. I've got to go over here to get this paper, bring it back. She tells me that's not good enough. Go back. So it took me 7.5 hours to schedule an appointment, which they later canceled.
Oh my gosh.
So that's realistic. In fact, more people die of complications to war injuries 5 years down the road after they're out of the military than they do to the actual injuries. Why? Because the VA can't get to them. Right. But I want to back up for a second because I always blow the gun on this. We are libertarian apologists. So we are libertarians, we are Christians. And I always want to remain true to the source. In my preaching, I believe in sola scripturis, which is only scripture. So I would like to read this to you. In the Libertarian Platform, position 2.0, economic liberty. Libertarians want all members of society to have abundant opportunities to achieve economic success. A free and competitive market allocates resources in the most efficient manner. Each person has the right to offer goods and services to others on the free market. The only proper role of government in the economic realm is to protect property rights,
Establish a legal
educate disputes, and provide a legal framework in which voluntary trade is protected. All efforts of government to redistribute wealth or to control or manage trade are improper in a free society. And then come on down to, where is it? 2.13213. Healthcare. We favor a free market healthcare system. We recognize the freedom of individuals to determine the level of health insurance they want, if any, the level of healthcare they want, and the care providers they want, the medicines and treatments they will use. That's very important. And all other aspects of their medical care, including end-of-life decisions. I think what that's referring to is either pulling the plug or physician's-assisted suicide.
Probably, I believe.
Yeah. People should be free to purchase health insurance across state lines. So that's the libertarian side of the house.
Right.
And then without doing a very large Bible study, you have, and I'm going to do this for the libertarians that aren't Christians, so Christians, please just bear with me. You have the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament is vastly larger. The Old Testament before Jesus. The New Testament is during and after Jesus. The Old Testament, the Pentateuch, or the books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, those were written by Moses over about and my mind just went blank. Those 5 books, about 100 years?
I've only heard a little bit about this. I know Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy were written by Moses. Genesis, I actually need to do some study. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure who wrote the book of Genesis.
Yeah. So Genesis is everything before Moses. Yeah. And then Exodus is them leaving Egypt. They exit Egypt. And then Leviticus, they are on the wander looking for the promised land. Not looking for the promised land. They've got to pay some dues. We'll get into that in a later discussion. Then you have Leviticus. And Leviticus is, you often hear to Levitical law. And a lot of you are familiar with this because a lot of people take issue with some of the things said in this, primarily to sex laws. Homosexuality, transgenderism. A lot of this bestiality is covered in Leviticus, which I find amazing. Like, God just knowing, hey, let's not put our reproductive organs inside of animals. That is, wow. But that was an issue that's addressed. The other issue that's addressed is, did you know that every adult male in the Israelites, right? So when you refer to Israel, you're referring not to the country, but you're referring to the people of Israel. You're referring to God's chosen folks. So even before they come into Israel, they're Israel. Israel is a people group, not just a set of borders. Every member of Israel, the tribes, this would include Adam. Adam is to carry a shovel with him wherever he goes. Why? Because part of their health and dietary issues is they are to bury their poop outside of the camp. And when you got to go, you got to go. So you got to carry a shovel, so when you got to go, you can dig the hole. And a lot of fish, if it doesn't have fins or scales, they weren't to eat it. Bottom feeders, essentially, right? Crabs and crustaceans. And then swine. We know that bacon is unclean meat. And a lot of this had to do with health concerns, right? Bacon or pork is one of the number 1 causes of food poisoning. So is crustaceans, right? They're pretty high up on the list. I think bacon is because a lot of people consume pork more than they do crustaceans. But there's all of these preventative measures. And then we have the laws for leprosy, right? How do we handle leprosy? How do we handle this? What do we do with, like, animals that just fall out in the field? but we don't eat them because we don't know what killed them, and we don't want to eat those pathogens.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's all of this stuff that, God gave them the law. And because God's all-knowing, he knows, hey, let's not do this because this is going to cause you food poisoning. Let's not do this because this can kill you. Let's not do this because this is going to do all these things. There's actually a book. There's a man, Leviticus Today. He wrote a book series, and he takes it down to the building codes. We get a lot of our original building codes from Leviticus. When you look at,
Leviticus,
say what?
Leviticus Today.
Yeah,
Do you remember the author's name?
I don't. I'll have to look. It was one of Ken Ham's buddies.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So if you dig a hole, you got to put safety cones and safety tape. They put 4 sticks and they ran vines. Why did they run vines? Because they didn't have plastic.
That's what they had.
So God saw all the way back. So that's the libertarian side of the house, and that's the Bible side of the house. I think there's a lot to do with what you put into your body.
Yeah.
I personally take vitamin C and zinc every day because I think that having a strong immune system is super important. And if you are a veteran, you want to take care of your body because the VA hurts your mental health.
Yeah. And if you're a veteran, chances are your body's falling apart. Needs to be
not because of combat, but because you can't get a doctor's appointment.
Just because.
Yeah. So that's where we're at. The libertarians say, hey, you should be able to do what you want with your money.
Yeah.
And the Bible says, take care of your body.
Yeah, it does. The Bible has a lot to say about healthcare, and that's so interesting. I didn't know about Leviticus Today, but I know about all the studies and all the research and all the simple common sense that points to Old Testament law being based on science, being based on someone who clearly had an understanding of microbiology. That Old Testament Levitical law had to have been written by someone who understood hygiene and sanitation and germs and how sickness works. It's written 3,000 plus years ago, and how could they know all this? How could they know that if there is an unclean animal in a tent and there is an open jar, whatever is in that jar is unclean and has to be thrown out? But if the jar has a covering on it, it's clean. How do they know that? Literally, how do they know wash your hands before you eat? That's a Levitical law. How did they know?
It's also coronavirus law, so.
Yeah, how did they know? I don't know if this is, I'm trying to think, is it, in tradition, they circumcise on the 8th day. I don't specifically know if that is in Levitical law.
It is.
But it is. Okay. Well, again, why is the 8th day significant? Why is the 8th day significant?
That's a question I don't have the answer to.
Because that's when there is a spike in vitamin K production in the boy's body on the 8th day. And so that is the best day to get some kind of cut or incision because your body will heal very quickly.
Yeah. And all of these things, right? No one disputes Leviticus being written when it was written.
Yeah, it's a common, they say, oh, that's just some ancient book.
Right.
It's if they bash it that way.
So either Moses without microscopes and 5 doctorate degrees and all this stuff was smarter than all the CDC combined with all of their equipment, or he was inspired by God.
Yeah.
I think that Moses was a pretty smart dude, but even he had to take help from his father-in-law. So I'm going to say he had help from God.
Yes. I hate to cut this short, but my phone battery is about to die. I didn't realize I was that low. We can do probably another 5 minutes.
Okay.
But sorry.
I want to read some very quick statistics and get your feel.
Go ahead.
In other words, $1 in 1990 is equivalent to the purchasing power of about $1.96. So about a dollar in 1990 was twice as powerful as a dollar today.
Yep.
So cost of a baby is between $10,000 and $30,000 today. A cost of a baby back then was in 1990 was about $2,000. 2 to 4,000. One round of chemotherapy today is between $10,000 and $100,000. It seems to be closer to the $10,000 mark. In 1990, it was closer to about $400. A doctor's visit today is between $300 and $600. We'll just say it's $300. And in 1990, it was $81. So none of those numbers match the buying power of a dollar.
Right.
So I would think that if a doctor's visit in 1990 was $100, today it should be $196, but it's at least $100 more, and that's the low end of things. Then you have a kid. Kids are expensive.
Yep.
Why is that? Why is it that healthcare the cost of healthcare hasn't risen with the inflation of a dollar?
There's it's inflation. That is a lot of the cause for the increase in the prices, but you're right, it couldn't be all of the cause. And so we have...
Because it doesn't go with inflation. Inflation goes like this, and healthcare goes like this.
Right. And so what gives? Right now, we have a government that's basically, we have British healthcare. We have most of Canadian healthcare already. We have a mostly socialist healthcare system as it is. Medicare, Medicaid, and also in the private sector, private healthcare sector. I think now, last I checked, it's probably more now. 64% of healthcare dollars spent in the United States are spent by the government. Most healthcare cost is already covered by the US government. We're already most of the way to socialism in our hospitals. And that is why it's so expensive. That is why it is so expensive. The average, in 2010, the average American paid 17% of their paycheck for healthcare. The average Brit paid 30% of their paycheck to healthcare. They say healthcare doesn't cause bankruptcy in other countries. Well, you're right. In a way, it'll never be written down that the cause of their bankruptcy was their medical care. But the bankruptcy rate in Britain is, I checked this last year, I think it's 19% higher in Britain than it is in the United States, or what they call the insolvency rate. It is it's like a fifth higher in Britain than it is in the United States, because there's so many darn taxes that people have to pay. And so anything the defenders of healthcare say, the defenders of socialism say, is true. None of it's true. It's more bureaucratic, it's more expensive, it drives up bankruptcies, and it drives up doctor corruption. That's a big problem in Britain, and medical malpractice. And it's insane.
Let's talk about America for a second. Right now, there's a big conspiracy theory. I have a mom and a girlfriend who are both in healthcare, and they've both given me firsthand accounts. So I don't think this is a conspiracy theory anymore. I think some of the things that I hear are not true, but right now, if you have COVID-like symptoms and you die, it's a COVID death.
Right.
I heard one, and I don't know if this is true, but it's funny. Like when things get ridiculous, I assume they're at least half true, or there's a reason that people are saying this.
Right.
A man jumped out of an airplane, and his parachute didn't open, and he died on impact. And because he had COVID-like symptoms, he died of COVID. Right? I don't know if that particular one's true, but my mom told me that a 94-year-old man came in with double pneumonia and COVID, and he died, and they called it a COVID death. And I'm sitting here going, he's 94 years old. Who? I please, like, I'm not a butthole. I am, but please don't count this as me being a butthole.
Right.
My grandfather is 96, and he almost dies every other day because he's 96. He's been in hospice a bunch. It's a really sad situation. But when people do this, it's like, we have to come to an end at some point, right?
Right.
The Bible declares it, and so does common sense. So when people are like, oh, I can't believe he died, I'm like, really? Because he was 112. And he had cancer for 15 years. So way to go, dude. Like, champion life.
Right.
But there's all these things going on where they're calling it a COVID death. And the reason they're calling it a COVID death is because if the hospital has a COVID death, they get money for it. If the hospital has a COVID patient, they get money for it. If they put someone on a, what do they call that thing?
The ventilators?
A ventilator. They get money for it. And I've talked to people, my mom specifically, has said that putting people on ventilators that don't absolutely need to be on a ventilator is asking them to die. Because then what happens is their body goes, oh, well, I don't have to breathe anymore. And if their body doesn't keep breathing for itself, when you take them off, they're going to struggle. So if they need to go on it, put them on it. But if they don't need to go on it, don't put them on it. But doctors are putting them on it because they're getting $50,000. And let me clarify, they get $50,000 for hooking the machine up. Then they get a daily fee, right? And when most of your patients don't pay their bill and the government's going to give you 50 grand, I can see, oh, let's put them on it and let's hook them up for 30 days. And we'll have 200 grand because it's like $3,000 a day. So if you get them on it for 30 days, that's $140,000 for the hookup and the keeping them on it for 30 days. Like, that's a doctor's salary. I understand why they do it. I don't think they should. I don't agree with it. But we're creating a system where it makes sense to give people care they don't need.
Right. Criminal. Yeah, my grandpa's a doctor, and he's made it basically his ministry. And he talks about just the sad stories of physicians he's seen. And he is 83 and opened up a new practice a couple of years ago and really enjoys it. Oh, yeah. And he's going 50 hours a week as a doctor, comes home, takes care of the farm, and then goes out in the evening with my grandma. That's his routine.
Awesome.
Yeah. He's more fit and active than I am.
My great-grandfather is 96, and I asked him a couple of years ago, I was like, how have you lived this long? He goes, just the way not to die is just keep living. Like, guys that retire, like, okay, My grandfather joined World War II. Crazy story. A bus pulled up and said, son, the Japs attacked. We're going to war. And he got on the bus.
Wow.
Right? World War II ended. He got out. He went into carpentry. Korea kicked off. He went back in. Korea ended. He went back into carpentry. Vietnam happened. He went in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. My grandfather
was one of the three war guys.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. My grandfather retired as a Master Chief. He retired as a chief in Korea. No, sorry. He left as a chief after the end of Korea, and then he went back in and was able to retire during Vietnam as a Master Chief, and then left and went back to carpentry. And then he retired from carpentry and then went back into carpentry and retired and went back in. He's bought a few RVs because he would retire, buy an RV, and then say, screw it, I got to go back to work.
Right, yeah. My grandpa would be dead in a week if he stopped working.
Yeah, and I think that's why they live so long, is because they just don't stop living.
I'll never retire.
So they're they put him in hospice like 5 times since I've been alive, and every time he gets out, and he's like, "What are you gonna do?" He's like, "I'm gonna go back to carpentry." And the dude has multiple millions of dollars, and it's just like, and he's got his government pension, from like retiring as a Master Chief. I think that's $60,000. So it's like he just keeps living, but he gets all this medical care, and the amount of young men, like I'm talking elementary school kids, middle school kids, they're on prescription drugs for either antidepressants or ADD or something is ridiculous. And the reason is they're incentivized. The schools are incentivized, the parents are incentivized, the doctors are incentivized, and it's like, why? Right? Because when you put a chemical into somebody's body, their body goes, oh, I don't have to make that chemical anymore, and their body becomes weaker because of it. And then after so many years, they can't do it anymore. It takes decades for their body to learn how to redo that chemical. So it's like, why are we putting young people on? Well, we're putting young people on because there's an incentive. Why? Because like you said, we're going into socialism, and the government's controlling means of production. So doctors go, I have my own practice, but you can't say you have your own practice when what would you say 76% of the money's coming from the government? You don't have your own practice. You have a government practice with a side job.
Right. Yeah.
So I ranted. I
ranted too. Any closing up thoughts?
I don't want the government to control means of production, especially when it involves keeping me alive.
Yep. Healthcare is not, we need to get out of the mentality that healthcare is so important, government needs to move in and make sure it runs correctly.
It's so important they need to stay out.
Healthcare is so important, government needs to stay far away from it. We need to abolish Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and the FDA and the CDC and just all of Health and Human Services. Just abolish all of that. The federal government has no constitutional authority to have those institutions. Just abolish them, turn it back over to the free market, and watch our health improve dramatically.
Well, when you give, and we discussed this on the military one, when you give private industries government contracts, they figure out ways to do it cheaper. So if we say, hey, the CDC is now a private organization, figure it out, they'll become the new SpaceX, right? And they'll do things that the government never thought possible because they're doing it with their own money and they don't want to waste it. And they'll become better because of it. So, sorry, that's my actual closing remark. All right, guys, it looks like Zach had to sign off a little early. His battery died. I'm going to ask that you share this podcast. I'm going to ask that you like this podcast, that you do everything you can do. We really need your support. We're kind of struggling here. We're 8 episodes in, and we're struggling to hit 10 views. But if you know somebody that wants to be on the show, have them shoot us a comment, have them shoot us an email, and I would greatly appreciate it. We love you, praying for you. If you got something, put it in the comments, send us a message, and we'd love to hear from you. Bye.